Nuuspod, die tuiste vir Afrikaanse stories agter die nuus.
Goeiedag en baie welkom by Nuuspod. Ons is besig met 'n reeks gesprekke met die burgemeesters van die verskillende metro's in die land. En in vandag se gesprek praat ek met Dr. Mpho Phalatse. Sy is die nuut verkose DA burgemeester van Johannesburg. Dit het in 'n verrassende wending gebeur dat sy verkies is nadat ActionSA en die EFF besluit het om haar eerder te steun en teen die ANC te stem toe dit gekom het by stemtyd vir die burgemeester. Nou Johannesburg het baie probleme. Deel daarvan is hulle krag en watervoorsieningsstelsels wat groot kopseere veroorsaak. Die 12.000 kilometer padnetwerk is in alle opsigte maar basies vervalle. Misdaad neem dag vir dag toe. Maar dit bly steeds Suid-Afrika se ekonomiese hartklop wat 15% tot die bruto binnelandse produk bydra. En dis van hierdie stad dat Dr. Mpho Phalatse nou die burgemeester is. Ek het vroeër met haar gepraat. Kom ons gaan hoor wat sy te sê het. Congratulations. I know it's unexpected and a surprising move, but still congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it happened nonetheless, regardless how it happened, and it's worth celebrating.
I'm looking at the background behind you. I was, for a long time in my life, I lived in Johannesburg and I fell in love with the city. That background you can see from a little hill there by Jan Hofmeyer, where the church is standing there by Braamfontein. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but there's a white Dutch Reformed church. And if you stand on that hill, you see that exact background. So my first question to you is, do you love Joburg?
I fell in love. It was unexpected. I first came to Joburg in 1995. First year of varsity. I came here to study engineering, and I felt too much in love with Joburg, but I was too young. And coming from Victoria, it was worlds apart, and and I felt like, the second year after I realized I didn't like what I was studying, I immediately decided to go back home, because I needed the sense of calm and peace that Pretoria offers. And I never thought that I could settle in Johannesburg. But in 2010, I then applied to specialize. And I applied to Medunsa, to UP, and to Wits. And Wits was the first one to have a vacancy, and they were the first one to offer me an opportunity. So by default, I came back. And 10 years later, I'm a citizen, I'm a resident, and I'm even the mayor, and 5 years later, I was an MMC. So I have fallen in love, but it had to grow on me. Joburg had to grow on me. I grew up in such a different environment. I grew up in Mabopane, which was Buputatswana at the time when I was growing up. So the culture was different. And Joburg was a bit too much for me at first, but now I love Joburg. I love the diversity. I love the culture. I love its heritage. I love its people. So yeah, over time, I've really, really fallen in love with the city.
There's another point of view when you go across from this view that you have to the other side by the Yeovil Water Tower.
Right.
Then you look back to this view that I have from the other side, and why I'm just mentioning it because I remember how many times I went there and stopped there, and there you see the different cultures of Johannesburg, the people that come from other countries, the people of South Africa coming together at that hill and all having their sacred time on that hill. So if you need a list of the important places to visit in Johannesburg, just phone me after this.
Okay, I'll do that. I will definitely do that.
Dr. Mpho Phalatse, you are now the mayor of the most vibrant city in South Africa. It's a city not without problems. It's a crime-ridden city. It's a city with all other sorts of problems, but yet it is an economic hub of South Africa. What are your plans for this city now that you are sitting in the position where you are?
You've said it right, that it's the economic engine of this country and in many ways of the continent as well. And that's why we still attract so many people looking for opportunities, because that's what Joburg has been over the years. You know, we've attracted labor into our gold mining sector over the years. And after that, people still came in looking for jobs and other opportunities. As a mayor, I've got a huge task of restoring the economy of the city. Now, how you do that as government is by partnering with the private sector, because I believe that the private sector will help us grow the economy, help us create jobs. But the private sector needs an enabling environment to be able to do that. And government needs to provide that enabling environment. What it means is that we need to make sure there's basic service delivery so businesses can thrive. Provision of water, provision of electricity, roads that are surfaced, clean streets, safety, transport, those types of economic drivers that are required for a city such as Joburg, so that the people who come into Johannesburg are not disappointed, and that they're able to be accommodated by the city and welcomed by the city, and that they can actually realize the opportunities that they've come here to get.
What you are pointing out, I do believe, because I think the DA have a proven track record in the Western Cape, in Midvaal, but as the EFF have said, they didn't vote for the DA when they voted you in. They voted against the ANC. As ActionSA have said, they want the DA to be humble and work with other parties. How do you plan to handle that? Because that should have an impact on your reign in the next 5 years, if you get to 5 years.
Well, the DA believes in diversity. We're the most diverse party in the country. We've been in existence for a while. So over the years, we've really mastered how to manage diversity. And a lot of times we're misunderstood by people. They think we're fighting when we're actually disagreeing. And we understand that disagreement is healthy because it stimulates thinking. It opens you up to different ways of seeing things, different ways of approaching things. So I believe if there's any politician who can lead diversity, the DA politician, because we're so used to managing diversity internally. Managing diversity means, you know, understanding that we are different. So we don't have a coalition agreement with the EFF. I need to clarify that. We went into council on our own. We didn't have any coalition partners. We had our 69 votes and we went in with those 69 votes and we didn't know what was going to happen. And this has now happened. So what does it mean for us and a party like the EFF, for instance? We've been very clear. We've got a set of values and principles that we want to adhere to, and we're not going to compromise on those. But does it mean that we can't do anything with the EFF? No, we can, even outside of a normal, a formal coalition arrangement. And we've already demonstrated that. When I was MMC for Health, we agreed with the EFF on extension of service hours in our clinics. We agreed with the EFF on the rollout of mobile clinic services. Those are just a few examples of areas where we found each other. And we agreed on doing something positive that's going to benefit our residents. But there's also areas where we don't agree. We don't agree with land invasion that's uncontrolled, for instance, you know, and we're resolute that we're going to clamp down on land invasion. And we're going to stick to that. We're not going to deviate from that. So it's about understanding where are the commonalities and strengthening those and capitalizing on those areas of the relationship. But it's also about understanding where the parameters are, the boundaries, communicating them clearly and being resolute around respecting those boundaries. So that's the approach that we're going to have. Of course, we need to create a safe space for everyone to ventilate and everyone to express themselves and what they would like to see happening in the city. Often the disagreements are around the approach. You know, if you look at a lot of EFF policies even, they're passionate about redress. we agree that there needs to be redress. Where we often disagree on how that redress must happen. So even in 2019, what caused the collapse of our government was largely because of that disagreement, where we felt the EFF feels to accomplish redress, you need to neglect certain constituencies and focus only on the poor. If we believe it doesn't work, we believe it's faulty, that economics. We believe that you need to take care of your ratepayers, keep them happy, so they can help you build the city and help you take care of the poor. So we don't agree on the what, we agree that the poor must be taken care of. Yes. We only disagree on the how. Yeah. And it takes diversity management to be able to say, okay, let's talk about what it is that we want to achieve, and we find each other, and we find there's agreement. Let's talk about how we want to get there. Then we can debate on the how with reason, and hopefully we'll end up finding a way to do something. So I've got a track record of doing things that, for instance, the mobile clinics. It was a motion that was tabled by the EFF, and the DA supported it in council, and I led the implementation. So I know that it's possible, to find such areas of commonality.
Let me just say this. When I said if you reach 5 years, I didn't doubt your capabilities for a moment. I was just I just learned to get to know the EFF.
The vulnerability that comes with us being a minority government.
But I listened to Julius Malema this afternoon when they have their presser, and what I heard was a different EFF than the one that I listened to in 2016, when they were out to destabilize. This time around, they sound different. Right. What do you think?
So a lot of people are concerned about the EFF voting us out. We believe that we need to stabilize council. Joburg has been through a lot in the last 5 years. Joburg is a strategic city for South Africa. And I know that the EFF understands that as well. And I believe that we're going to have to be very wise in how we approach government. I mean, we could easily say, well, we're in government now, let's get 10 DA MMCs and let's run the city. But there's no wisdom in that. We should rather say, how do we stabilize council? How do we reduce the chances of this government collapsing? And we've immediately decided as the Democratic Alliance that we need to approach other parties to see if we cannot form a multi-party coalition that will be stable and that can govern for a full 5 years. And that's what we're busy with right now. We're busy negotiating with other parties to find out what it is that they want and what it is that we can offer them. And hopefully in the next few days, we will be announcing what those agreements look like and what type of government we envision will take the city forward.
Mpho, the DA, as we have said previously, have a proven track record.
Yeah.
But despite that, at the moment, or in these elections, they didn't manage to translate that into to voters supporting them, in as much giving them the mandate to go ahead. Why do you think that is?
Well, there is a trust deficit that we have, particularly with Black voters. And in South Africa, Black voters are the majority. And that is an area that we need to work on as the Democratic Alliance. It does not mean that we are not for Black voters, but it just means that we've not understood. It's like being in a relationship and not understanding your partner's love language. You love them, but in the manner in which you're expressing it, they're not receiving the love, or they're not feeling it. I think that's what's happening with the Democratic Alliance and Black voters. I think we need to find that connection. What it is that the Black voter needs to see to understand that the DA is for them. A good example, for instance, is this whole BEE and how the ANC has approached redress in the last 27 years, where we've introduced all types of mechanisms that have actually increased and grown inequality. If you look at the Gini coefficient, which is the measure of inequality between the rich and the poor, it's gotten worse in the last 27 years. Why? Because the ANC went and created a Black elite by giving opportunities to the same politically connected Black people, enriching them more and more, while the rest of the Black people got poorer and poorer. The Democratic Alliance has a different approach, where the Democratic Alliance is saying, let us do means testing when we have to decide on who to give opportunity to. So in other words, if you're saying you're disadvantaged, prove it. We're not going to exclude anybody, people from different races. We're not going to use race as a measure. We're going to rather use means testing to determine who has to access opportunities and who should not. A lot of Black people at face value may frown upon that because we're not calling it a Black something. But if you look at it closely, you'll see that such an approach would actually benefit Black people more than the ANC's approach ever did. So again, our hearts are in the right place. We've got the right plan to empower Black people, but in the manner in which we communicated or presented to them, they may not see it that way. And I think that's where the disconnect is, and that's where we need to do a little bit of work as the Democratic Alliance.
I've heard a nice story the other day about a certain product, a sauce, that they were selling and they didn't make enough money. And they thought there's something wrong with the sauce, but there wasn't something wrong with the sauce. What they did then is they made the opening of the bottle a little bit bigger. And then all of a sudden, they sold more sauce. So maybe you just have to open the hole a little bit.
It was probably through market research. So I agree that we need to invest a little bit in research that will help us understand where we're missing each other, particularly with the Black voter.
Your biggest obstacle, what do you see is that in Johannesburg?
Well, in the immediate term, I would say, the inability to immediately form a government. So the fact that we have to go through coalition negotiations after the election of the mayor. Often this happens prospectively. So you go into the election knowing who you're going to be working with, and you can immediately hit the ground running. So I'm not happy about this delay, but I understand what has brought it about. Things happened in an anomalous fashion. I'm just hoping that we can wrap this up in the next few days so that we can have a May come and hit the ground running. Other obstacles are, of course, things like culture. Within the institution, a culture of complacency, a culture of excuses, a culture of corruption, so many things that take away from what we should be doing as an institution, which is serving residents of Joburg. We've got 37,000 employees of the city of Joburg who are supposed to be rendering services. You'd think the city would be so golden and so perfect, right? But why is it not the case? Because there are institutional challenges. So we need to look internally before we seek to resolve issues externally. We need to first examine our capacity to deliver what we need to deliver and deal with the internal issues and make sure that we're in a healthy place where we will be able to do delivery. So I definitely think it's an obstacle, but it's not insurmountable. It's something that we just need to, I've already started the handover process. I've started scrutinizing what is happening just to get to do an analysis, of where we are in the true state of the city so that we know what we need to tackle in order to get the city to work. That's another one. And then externally, of course, we've got not insurmountable, but huge challenges. We have backlogs. It's insane to see the kind of backlogs we're dealing with in terms of infrastructure backlogs, for instance. And if you look at the budget that we have, or the revenue that we're able to generate, and against the backlog that we need to address, that is quite a challenge. So it calls for us to be creative around how to bring money in. So some of the solutions are things like billing, getting the billing system right, resolving billing disputes, bringing in the money that's in the debtors book. We've got about 36 billion rands that we have not collected because of outstanding billing disputes. So those kind of things we need to start tackling immediately. The culture of non-payment by some government departments, big business, who can afford to pay. There's entities that owe the city millions, not because they can't afford to, but because we've not optimized collections. Those kinds of things we need to start tackling so that we bring in the money that we need to render services. But we're going to also need to stretch ourselves beyond our comfort zone. So we need to start opening up to different ways of doing things, including partnering with the private sector more and more. As government, we can sometimes be so territorial of our space and not allow the private sector to play a role. But we need to get to a point where we're realistic about what we can and cannot do in the short and medium term, and look at that against the backdrop of the enormity of the needs on the outside. We need to be able to say, okay, to the private sector, let's talk, let's see how we can make this work. I mean, a good example is in the provision of power. Many people are starting to look at alternatives. People going off the grid for government means a loss of revenue. How do we protect that revenue? Shouldn't we rather be part of the solution? Even if they're going and working with IPPs, shouldn't we rather be working with IPPs, so that we increase capacity, make sure that people are getting stable power supply through a differential model, where our revenue doesn't have to be threatened. So we're going to need to force ourselves into a lot of creative spaces we never imagined ourselves in before. But that's the only way we're going to be able to build.
Dr. Mpho Phalatse, I want to thank you. I know you've had a long day, but I just want to tell you the way that you are handling this, I'm a big fan. You made me a big fan tonight. May I say that? I don't know. It's not very objective from a journalist, but I don't mind. I became a good fan the way you handle this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity. And I hope we'll be able to chat again later, continue to hold us accountable, continue to keep the communication lines open.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Nuuspod, die tuiste vir Afrikaanse stories agter die nuus.